allegiance. Councilmember White.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mayor Larkey,
Here.
Councilmember White,
Here.
Councilmember Powell,
Here.
Councilmember Pryan,
Here.
Councilmember Kraft, Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Goff, Councilmember Lawson,
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
We have a quorum. Personal appearances. A, recognition of employees' years of service. You need that microphone? She's over there.
Good evening. This is Benjamin Newell. He's a fire apparatus operator. He's currently assigned to our B shift out of Station 82, which is over by the police station. And tonight we're recognizing Ben for his 20 years of service to the city of Belton, and just wanted to show him a little bit of appreciation. So appreciate it. Don't go too far because they want to get a picture of you and JJ together. I'm going to show them how cops and firefighters do it.
Hey, what? Hey, Chief, didn't he retire already?
Yes, he did retire, but he stayed on as a part-time employee.
He's back.
And so this is J.J. Mosby, and there's a lot of people in this community who probably know J.J. in different aspects, all the way from his civic engagements with Little League sports, all the way to your work with the VFW, and then with the police department, and I'm leaving out a lot of stuff, Park Board member for a long period of time, and we're here to recognize him for 30 years of service to this community. And this is just a small token of of our appreciation for this man. And he's also one of the people that I used to count on a daily basis for questions when I had something about the organization. And I love this guy to death.
Don't have any more questions?
No.
Can they be that close to each other?
No school supplies involved in this action. That it? No more? All right. All right, item B, Dennis Hull, you're up. Yeah, right there, just state your name and address, and then you got 5 minutes.
My name's, first of all, hello, Mayor Larkey and council members. My name's Dennis Hall. I live at 710 Lacey Lane, Belton, Missouri. I'm here to address the rental inspection program. I am on the committee. The all-volunteer committee worked pretty hard on this and sent to the Planning Commission what we thought was a very fair proposal, which was passed unanimously. I did attend the work session via Zoom where Councilperson Clark said he couldn't support the inspection of long-term rentals. Due to his comments, that part was deleted, which I don't think any of us were very happy about, but one of the arguments being that long-term renters must be happy with their landlords. Well, I happen to know a lady that's exactly the case. She's been renting the same house over 35 years. So I called and got her input yesterday. I'll use my own house as a little example, even though it's not a rental. It's still an old house and house's age. I was in my basement about 3 weeks ago. I saw a little drip on the floor. There's no water lines around. I'm like, what the heck? Look up, it's my waistline. It's a 3-inch cast iron waistline that had rusted a pinhole. So I look all the way up and down that waistline, it's rusted. needless to say, it's already been replaced in plastic because that could have turned into open waste in my basement. So I asked this lady, I told her the story. I said, would you know what you're looking at? She goes, no. I said, would you know if you saw an outlet that had a little bit of char on it, that outlet might be arcing? No. So basically, she's telling me, I don't know what I'm looking at. Whereas a trained professional inspector coming in once every 5 years could possibly avert such a thing as a fire, open waste in the basement. They would catch those type of things. And so I asked her what she thought about that. I said, what would you think of being inspected once every 5 years? Now, she's not the landlord, she's the tenant, which a lot of the argument has been about the tenant. And she said, well, it's an inconvenience, but I understand it, after what you've described. Yeah, I don't know what I'm looking at, and I don't think most people do, unless they've been in the construction industry and so on and so forth. So my thing is, what's the bigger inconvenience? And I would ask each one of you, 30, 40 minutes once every 5 years to have somebody walk through. They're not inspecting the tenant. They're not looking to see if you do your dishes or anything like that. They're inspecting the structure that you're paying to live in to try as near as possible make it a safe place to live. And so is that more inconvenient than if that waste line breaks and that basement fills with sewage? They got to move out. That's uninhabitable. Same thing with a fire or a flood or anything else. Which one of those two would be more inconvenient? And we all know that a problem is much easier and cheaper fixed early rather than wait until it becomes a huge, huge problem. I mean, I'm fine with the whole rental inspection program the way it is. I would like to see that 5-year, one-time inspection every 5 years for long-term rentals put back in. I don't know who could do that or how it's done, but I'd like to see that back in there. And I've heard something about waivers for the tenant. That's just open for corruption, and you got a landlord that says, hey, sign the waiver or you don't live here, or sign the waiver or your rent goes up $100. That's just, I hope that's a no-brainer there. But my bottom line is, I don't see how you could possibly say you have a fair and equitable rental inspection program if you are going to leave anybody, give any landlord a so-called free ride. And that's what it is. If you don't do those long-term rental inspections, then you're giving a certain group, out of that group, special treatment. And if I were one of the other landlords, I would not be happy at all about it. And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say, but possibly litigation. I don't know. But I just don't see how you can have a fair program if you're going to leave somebody out. That's about all I got. If anybody has any questions.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Item C, Wanda Thompson.
Okay.
Was that your pen? Okay.
Hi, I'm Wanda Thompson. I live at 1100 Main Street, Belton. I am also on the committee, and my phone number is not public knowledge, but I've had plenty of people talk to me about this, and I am a take charge sort of girl. And when I see things that need to be fixed, I'd like to have them fixed. And this long-term rental thing, for me, is a huge issue. But I've probably changed how I think about it a little bit since it was first talked about in committee and then taken out in committee, and then I've gone back through the weeds and talked to my neighbors about this. And I happen to live on a street where there are a lot of people that do long-term rentals. A gentleman that lives near me has been there for 30 years. And they are alarmed about every 5 years because they know that there are things in their homes that is not right. And they don't want the inspection. They feel that they will be put on the street. They live in houses that are not the going rate, less than $1,000 a month, and some of them much less than $1,000 a month. So there are problems, and they know there are problems. So this week and last week, I went back by and talked to all of them, and they're scared spitless of this inspection because they know that they're going to be put out until things are fixed, and they know that they're going to come back in with houses that are not costing the same amount of money that they're costing now. So I think they're underserved. I don't think they're spoken for well, but I think they're a catch-22. I think they have no other option than living there. And if they come in on a mandatory 5-year inspection, then they're going to be homeless. And they don't have the means to do anything else. So I know that you guys are feeling like I've turned the page on this, but I've really spent some time talking to my neighbors. I've really, really gone up and down and talked to a bunch of neighbors. And I think that we as a city have done them a disservice by not having something in place sooner. But because we now have a rental inspection program that we've got on the table, I think that it's possible that we could correct these flaws when they move out. If they move out, if something happens that they have to have an inspection, I think it could be rectified. But I don't think we should ever put these people in this positions again where they live in substandard housing. And I think that we've got to tweak the rental inspection program that we have and know who the landlords are and go in when these houses are empty and do not let them be rented until they're brought up to codes. I think that's our only option. This is a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword for me because I want to go in and say, let's fix this right now. And I don't know that we can. I don't know that we can because I don't know that there's a place that they can go for under $500 a month and live. I just don't think that's a possibility, but I think we can't continue to do the underrepresented and underserved people a disservice by allowing this to happen. And I think the only way we can make this happen is we keep an accurate record of landlords and tenants, and when these buildings go empty, they simply can't be rented again until things are fixed. And I mean, that's electrical, that's windows, that's plumbing, that's mold growing, everything that we've put in the rental inspection program should be enforced when these houses become available. And they should not be allowed to be rented again in substandard rental units. I mean, these are slums. These are not even just casual things. They're slums. And it shouldn't be allowed to happen. It shouldn't be allowed to happen on a watch where we have a committee and we've got council people that are interested in improving this thing. It can't happen on our watch again. And I'm adamant, and I've been a fire breather about these underrepresented people, and I don't want you to feel like I've thrown the committee under the bus because we've worked really hard on this. We've worked really, really hard. But the reality is these people don't have options. And that's what's sad about it, that they've been allowed to get into this position where they have no options. So, anyhow, that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Unfinished business, item A, motion approving the final reading of Bill 2023-36.
An ordinance amending sections 20-2, 20-6, and 40-2, and adding section 20-7 of the Unified Development Code related to public noticing requirements and alternative development standards for platting processes.
Present.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Pryan,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
White,
Aye.
Clark, Lawson,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes,
Richardson.
Aye.
motion carries. B, motion approving the final reading of Bill 2023-37.
An ordinance adding Article 5 to Chapter 10 of the Unified Development Code to implement a rental inspection program.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Go ahead.
My discussion, first of all, just want to thank the individuals that come up and talk tonight. Sometimes I think people think what you guys have done as a service that we don't recognize, and I don't want you to think that at all. I said 2 weeks ago that anytime we have an advisory board, I think what you guys do is important to us. but I also get calls from tenants that didn't want this. So me personally, I was brought up, I don't have issues with long-term rentals. I just don't think, me personally, want to invade in someone's home unless we're going to do it to every home in the city. And I just know individually, me as an individual, I don't want you coming in my house without a warrant or some firefighter or something. But I don't expect us to change that either. But it doesn't mean I downplayed what you guys have done as a committee either. So I don't want you to think that. But I did have tenants that told me they didn't want that. I expect landlords to do the right thing. If I was a landlord, which I am, I own a rental spot here in Belton on Main Street. I always make sure that my units are safe and efficient. The firefighters come in every year and inspect it. Unfortunately, I'm forced to on that one, I think, so I don't have a choice. But I make sure that my unit's always up to code and looks nice. And I expect every other landlord to do the same thing. So the tenants that you're talking about, Ms. Thompson, I wish there's some way that we can go after those landlords and make sure they're doing the right thing for their tenants. I mean, I always expect people to do the right thing.
Unfortunately, that's not happening.
So, that's all I have.
Anybody else?
Well, I was
One of you go ahead, go ahead.
oh,
Go ahead, no,
yeah.
go ahead, Ron.
well, I was expecting to reintroduce the 5-year plan. 2 seconds before the meeting started, I was informed that legally I can't do that because it was voted down last time, and one of the 4 people who voted against it must, and were apparently on the winning side, must introduce it. So I'm asking, my first step is to ask one of you to reintroduce it so we can debate it. Hearing nothing, then I make a motion that we table this until the next meeting.
Postpone.
Postpone, sorry. Postpone.
Please postpone. So we have a motion to postpone. Go ahead.
Postpone whole.
Yes, the whole
You're
10.
talking about postponing
B.
2023-37.
Yeah, 2023, yes.
Would that motion to postpone also apply to bill number 2023-38 as well?
Yes, it'd have to almost, or 3038 has to follow by 3037, yeah.
So to restate your motion, would it be a motion to postpone the final readings of bill number 2023-37 and bill number 2023-38?
Yes.
So we have that motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second.
Well,
Any discussion on the motion to postpone? Go ahead.
I guess I don't understand why we're postponing it for 2 weeks. I mean, in 2 weeks, you still can't bring back an amendment. I mean, let's get the rental inspection program so the staff can get it going. I mean, we're already,
well, let's have the lawyers say that, because as I read this, I can bring it back 2 weeks later.
Go ahead.
Let me make sure I even have it pulled up already. But under section 2-100J, motions to reconsider prior motions either have to be made at that meeting or the next succeeding meeting by a member of the majority party, and it has to be posted on the agenda. Now, given that outside of those 2 meetings, there is no guidance from the adopted rules of procedure in the Code of Ordinances or Robert's Rules of Order, Councilmember Powell could make the motion at the following meeting to amend the rental inspection program to include the 5-year inspection requirement.
Thank you.
well, I'll just say, Mayor, I'm not in favor of delaying this any farther so we can go back and debate an amendment that's already been turned down by a majority of us. We know 5 people that voted it down last time,
Oh,
so
4 people.
there was 5.
In the minutes, it says 4-4.
It was a tie.
Yeah, it was a tie.
Aye.
That was the waiver, I believe it was.
No. Well, it may have been. There was a lot of confusion, but if you look at Julie's notes, it's 4-4 on the primary amendment, which was to put in the 5-year plan. And Andrea can correct me if I'm wrong, or you can all read the minutes because they're in front of you on the computer.
There's additional things. I am seconding your motion to postpone it to discuss things like mold. things like the hotel motel tier program is kind of an interesting model for how we can have some teeth and accountability for landlords who fail inspections and aren't reacting in a positive way to this program. There's just a couple other things I think we can hammer out. Regardless, this doesn't take effect until July 1st of 2024, so why not get it closer to the goal line before just passing it as is when there's a lot of debate and maybe displeasure with it at its current state?
Well, another thing is, it was 4-4, and I'm not going to vote for her, but we missed the fifth person who could have been the deciding vote either way. And number two, even tonight, if it was allowed to be reintroduced, we have a whole nother mix of people. We have a gentleman who's not here, two people that aren't here. So the vote might have been very well different if we'd had it tonight. But I'm all for following the law, so we're not going to have it tonight. But so the only way I could possibly get this in, and again, let me reiterate my reasons. It was unanimously approved by SEAC. It was Codes Enforcement Advisory Council, unanimously approved by the Planning Commission, and it accommodates tenants. I understand what Wanda said, but who are afraid of that if they volunteer for an inspection, they'll cause a rent increase or eviction from their landlord. Now, she's saying that there may be such repairs that, in fact, they'll raise the rent because they make the repairs. And I don't see putting in a working GFI or putting batteries in a carbon monoxide detector is something where, well, I wouldn't raise the rent if I was the landlord in those situations. And finally, two other things. Long-term residents may not even realize there are hidden hazards. I mean, well, I'll say it, I'm elderly, and elderly people miss things. I let my batteries go. Sorry, Chief Sapp, but I let my batteries go for 2 years in my smoke detectors, not just 1 year. And my GFIs, I don't test them every month or even once a year. If they don't work, then if I cause a fire, that's on me. And finally, everybody on the opposing side, I'm sorry, because you're all good friends, but rentals are businesses, and other businesses are inspected routinely. The two businesses next door in Old City Hall, they're routinely inspected. The eateries, the brewery, everything, they're inspected by the health department. Businesses are inspected routinely. There's no reason that a business, somebody who's making money on something, shouldn't be inspected to make sure they're doing it right. So those are my reasons for putting other thoughts in people's heads that maybe we could vote on this 2 weeks or some other time than tonight, because tonight we're not going to have a vote on it on the amendments. On that particular amendment, I should say.
Go ahead.
Well, Wanda, just even something that I had been thinking about for the last brief time was we don't have a stronger clause about landlords who retaliate against tenants that allow or request. And we don't really have anything in there that clearly, I know it's implied in the state law, but I would like to have something that clearly states that there's no retaliation allowed. And I don't know what we could do about that, but I just think that that's an important aspect. I just started thinking about that as Wanda was even talking about that more, so.
And oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to go back, Councilman Powell, that businesses are inspected because I have the general population come into my building on a regular basis. They got to make sure it's safe. That's why businesses are expected. In a residential facility, I mean, if it's your physical home, nobody comes in unless they're invited by you. So I tell people all the time, you want to have rental inspections done. You just mentioned 3 things that you don't do personally. And I know if you're going to do it for rentals, then let's open it up and let's do it for every house in the city of Belton. You want to open up a can of worms, let's do it for every house in the city of Belton.
Well, that may be a good idea. I mean,
Because we have people that own houses that probably live in worse conditions than what Mrs. Thompson talked about. But we don't care about those people. We only care about someone who's renting. I mean, we had a gentleman back in December that didn't have water, didn't have electricity, and some lady's trying to fundraise for he could have all that stuff, but he owned his house. So we didn't, I mean, legally, he's not supposed to live there.
Well, I accept that point. I mean, it gets back to responsibility. Who's responsible for doing those?
Well, I think,
and I would
unfortunately-
agree that in most cases, like I said, I would think a tenant would, when you're chirping smoke detectors going off, the tenant would go and buy a battery. That's what I would
Absolutely. I
think.
think there's some responsibility on the tenants to make sure they live in a safe environment too.
I just wanted to bring up, because as soon as we vote to not or to postpone it, there's a couple other things I want to say about a whole different section.
Are we talking about the amendment?
Or can I?
On the amendment.
We're on the amendment. Okay, so we're still.
No,
we're not,
wait a minute, we're on the motion to postpone.
Okay.
So we're kind of getting, so you got any more about the motion to postpone?
Okay, so if I have any other things that I'd like people to think about in the next 2 weeks, and if we do postpone it, then I just have to wait till 2 weeks from now. Okay.
Correct, yes. Go ahead.
This is,
That don't make
By
sense. but
osmosis,
yeah,
I'll get
go
that.
ahead.
this is regarding postponing it. There's some data I think that would be helpful for us if staff can try to assemble it. I know we're starting at 0 with this program, but I think information that would be helpful is the number or percentage of our housing stock that is used for a rental, and how many of them are long-term renters that will be overlooked by the program in its current state. You know what I mean? If half of the houses in town are rentals and 25% of those are folks that have been there and won't get, worked into the inspection cycle, we may never see their property before, something happens or the condition of the property worsens. We're flying on fuzzy data because we're starting from scratch, and I think if we had a little more information like that, it could be helpful.
I'm going to go back to what I've been saying of the 5-year mandatory inspection. We can still call once a year and get this inspection. If you're not worried about the landlords raising their rent, why would they not call once a year and get an inspection to have their batteries tested or whatever you want? Yeah. I'm like, you can get an inspection once a year. What's the difference in that and having a mandatory 5-year? Get an inspection every year.
Because if your landlord,
Go ahead. You done?
if your landlord tells you, hey, if you call and get an inspection after 1 year, I know that's the only way it would have been requested is by you, so I'm raising your rent.
But you
5
just
years
said-
from 5 years from now, it happens automatically, and the tenant can blame it on the city, right?
But you just said that you wouldn't raise the rent if you were the landlord. If you're
Well,
just
I'm
going
just
to
one
get that
guy.
inspection for the batteries, the making sure your GFCI worked,
Yeah.
why would you not get that every year?
Well, the tenant or the landlord can call for it, that is, as I understand the proposal, but there's a lot of tenants, and Wanda just mentioned them, who don't want to have anything to do with asking for it. And so it would be automatic every 5 years if they stayed there over 5 years.
Councilman White.
I've become extremely confused. Not about the proposal, but about there seems to be some significant issues still with this, and that bothers me about trying to pass it when there doesn't seem to be there just seems to be some issues that still need to be resolved to me. And I just don't, I'm for the rental inspection program, but there's issues that I would even have that I would like to have strengthened, like I just said. But I can't talk about that because that's not on the proposal.
Yeah.
So I'm more confused now about this process.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
As far as the motion to postpone, I don't know what specific data points we would be wanting, other than I did hear Council Member Lawson mention she wanted some information on how many rentals we have in this community. It's about 50%. I mean, that's an estimate. I don't know that we have that exact number right now available anyway, but it's about 50%. I think it's a reasonable estimate. And then as far as the data on how long people stay in a rental, We don't have local data. I don't know that we have a way to aggregate that locally. We do have some national data that are estimates that we can lean on. And we do have that information to us, and it's like 2 years, 2+ years per unit before it turns over. It's like 2.5 years per unit before it turns over is the national average. And so those are the specific data. I get concerned that sometimes when we go through this process and we do a workshop on it, we have planning commission and we have all at the SEAC, and then a lot of these issues are brought forward, and then now are there new issues that need to be addressed, or are they the same issues we've already discussed that people aren't necessarily happy with where this is sitting compared to how they sit on those issues. I think we should consider that before we kick the can further down. I mean, this thing has been talked about in this community since 2018, 19. Yeah. So I mean, I just would. Now, obviously, you guys are at your discretion to do what you like on the timing of it or when policy goes into effect. I just would just bring that fact that this has been in discussion for quite a while in the community, and that's why with the legislation we have before you is very simple and kind of a pared down version of this, because the idea is let's start with a starting point, and then if it needs to be changed, there's not going to be a perfect solution. There's not going to be a perfect program that exists. I don't believe that one exists in this world right now. And so at some point we need to start with a program, and then we can get some data on how that's working for our community, and then we can say, okay, here's how we need to change this to better address the needs here locally. And that's my perspective.
All right. Anybody else have anything on the motion to postpone?
My things about the motion to postpone is based on having a new city clerk here last week. Did I hear Councilman Pryan say yes? Because he's voted supposedly yes, and I don't know exactly how he voted because he was up there, so I don't know where he voted. I mean, so I don't know if we need to amend the minutes based on what he voted last week, because it says that. But we actually are voting on the minutes after all this stuff. So when I go back and read the minutes, it says he's part of it was a 4-4 tie, what the minutes say, but I thought it was a 5-3. So that's, I guess, my interpretation. I thought it was 5-3 last week, but I mean, I don't know where James voted on, because when you have a delay in technology, it's not real time. So I don't know if our new assistant city clerk put it down wrong, or if it's, I don't know how Councilman Pryan actually voted.
It was 4-4.
Okay. Just double checking.
We can vote on the motion to postpone.
Anybody else on the motion to postpone?
I would like to clarify, are you postponing until August 8th, the next meeting, or August 22nd, or another date?
Well, according to what the legal advice was, it can't be last meeting or this meeting, but it can be the next meeting, which I guess is, August 8th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And also it's for both of them, 37 and 38.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else on the motion to postpone 2023-37 and 2023-38? Hearing none, and I'm going to do a roll call on this.
Councilmember White? The motion to postpone.
Yes.
Councilmember Lawson?
Yes?
Richardson?
No.
Pryan?
Yes.
Powell?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Clark?
Nope.
And Mayor Larkey.
No. Motion fails. So we're back to the motion.
Mayor Larkey.
Oh, we had more yeses.
There are 7 members of the city council present. 4 voted yes. Under the code of ordinances and the charter, an affirmative vote of the entire council is only required for the passage of ordinances. Otherwise, it is a majority of the members present. So in that case, the motion passes
Motion
4-3.
passes. New business.
How did we do it last time? I'll ask you later. Well, he just said that to pass an ordinance, you need the full council, but we didn't have the full council last
No,
time.
not the full council. You need a majority of the full council, so five.
Oh,
So
okay.
you need 4. I thought it was always you had to
I
have
gotcha,
5, so
I
I
gotcha.
stand
Yeah.
corrected on that.
Under Missouri law, when a voting threshold is not stated, you then turn on just a majority of the members present of the body.
Sorry to interrupt.
All right, new business motion. A, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-32.
An ordinance accepting a Mid-America Regional Council contract renewal and grant for services to individuals at the Belton Senior Center.
Present.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes. Good evening, Council. I do have something. The Mid-America Regional Council on Aging and Adult Services provides grants each year towards senior centers, transportation to senior centers, and programming that happens there at the centers. This grant agreement was approved last year, and Mark has renewed our agreement for fiscal '24. In fiscal '24, Mark has awarded the city up to $38,007 toward the operating cost of the center, and additionally awarded $14,443. I have a typo on my paper.
32 on
32
this.
toward the cost of our daily Oats bus transportation.
Anything else?
No, thank you, sir.
Anybody else have anything?
I just had a question. On page 29, there's a series of 3 boxes about boycotting Israel, and I have no skin in that game, but it does define, it makes us choose whether we're a company or a non-company or a company with 10 or more employees. How do we check those boxes, do you know?
This is something that Patrick and I have discussed each year. So he can tell you.
Yes, Missouri law requires all contracts with governmental entities over $100,000 to include a provision that the company doing work with the governmental entity does not use suppliers, contractors, or other people that have in any way, shape, or form at any point boycotted the nation of Israel. Currently, that is still the law in the state of Missouri, but it has been overturned in other states due to First Amendment protections. So at this time, we have typically not been doing anything from the city side because we have so many suppliers that I don't know if we could attest that every single supplier that has ever given anything to the city at any point has never boycotted the nation of Israel for any purpose during any time period. So as of last time, we did not check anything and it went through.
Oh, okay. So, because it looks like it makes you define yourself as a company or a non-company, and we're neither, right?
And the definition of company, it's again, the way the statute is written, it is not clear if another governmental entity falls into that definition. So this is still a gray area and a nebulous position that neither the city nor Mark really want to get into.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mayor, move for a second reading.
We have a motion for a second reading
Second.
and a second. Any discussion on the motion for a second reading? Hearing none.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2023-32.
An ordinance accepting a Mid-America Regional Council contract renewal and grant for services to individuals at the Belton Senior Center.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
Ryan,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
Motion carries. B, a motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-41.
An ordinance approving a special use permit for a daycare center at 127 Congress Street in the city of Belton, Cass County, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yep, thank you, Mayor and Council. Before this evening is a request for a special use permit for Bright Skies Childcare to continue operation of a daycare center at 127 Congress Street in Bradford Place business. Head Start operated out of this location for about 20 years prior to Bright Skies. Staff approved their business license earlier this spring to allow the daycare center to begin operation and utilize the previous legal nonconforming status of Head Start. The daycare center has 5 classrooms, which serve approximately 80 children, ages 6 weeks to 5 years old, and has received all local and state licenses. The site does meet all conditional requirements, including outdoor recreation area enclosures and adequate parking and pickup and drop-off areas. Planning Commission held a public hearing on July 5th, at which no one spoke in favor or in opposition to the request. The Commission recommended unanimous approval of the request for the special use permit, and staff also recommend with 3 conditions. If there are no unanswered questions or concerns with the request this evening, staff requests a double read to allow the applicant to proceed with their renewal of their business license for the 2023-24 business license year.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Someplace you say there that there's approximately 40 parking spaces that are required. And when I look at that overall, that picture or the photo from the sky or Google or whatever, I can count maybe 42 or 43 in all those parking lots. But there's other businesses in that building, right? Where are they going to park?
Although they're not required 40 parking spaces.
Oh.
So, I mean, they meet the minimum parking space that they have there. They take up a majority of the tenant spaces there. The other spaces are just small office users. So the overall site meets the minimum parking requirements.
Okay, so when it says here in this table that it's 40 proposed, approximately 40 spaces for the daycare, that's covers everybody that works in that building.
Yes, and I believe that is part of their lease agreement, is that they're allocated those amount of spaces per their lease. But that lease agreement exceeds what our minimum parking requirements would be for the daycare space.
So then I'd ask again, if they're having a Christmas special and there's 40 parents or 40 sets of parents that show up for this, where does everybody else park?
We ever seen a school, Councilman Rob?
Yeah.
Parking all over the streets,
yeah, well,
man.
I know.
I
They
mean-
park out on Cambridge, but
I mean, it happens once a year. I mean, it's,
Our parking code does not do a good job of addressing special events like that, but there are neighboring properties that they could potentially make agreements with in those situations, or there's always on-street parking
okay.
there as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Make a motion for second reading?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading. Hold on a minute, I'm writing something. Any discussion on the motion for second reading? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2023-41.
An ordinance approving a special use permit for a daycare center at 127 Congress Street in the city of Belton, Cass County, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Mayor, can we talk about parking spots? It's a joke, Rob. I'm just giving you a hard time.
I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Thanks.
Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Pryan,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Richardson.
Aye.
Motion carries. C, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-42.
An ordinance approving a final plat for Clark Acres, a 2-lot subdivision located at 900 West Cambridge Road in the city of Belton, Cass County, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yep, thank you, Mayor and Council. This is for a final plat for Clark Acres, which is a 2-lot subdivision at 900 West Cambridge Road. This plat would divide the unplatted 17.5-acre property into 2 platted lots. Lot 1 currently has a house under construction. Both lots meet the minimum 5-acre requirement to remain zoned agriculture. As part of the plating process, a 20-foot right-of-way dedication has been provided along Cambridge Road for future improvements as an arterial street. This plat does meet all subdivision regulations with the exception of the requirement that the maximum depth of residential lots not exceed 2.5 times the width of the lot. Based on the shape of the property, that is not possible, and the depth of the lots are compatible with adjacent agriculture properties. The Planning Commission did approve the preliminary plat and recommended unanimous approval of the final plat on July 5th. Staff recommends approval with 2 conditions that are provided in the ordinance. And if there are no unanswered questions or concerns with the request this evening, staff does request a double read to allow the applicant to proceed with signatures and record the plat at Cass County.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for a second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading. Anybody? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2023-42.
An ordinance approving a final plat for Clark Acres, a 2-lot subdivision located at 900 West Cambridge Road in the city of Belton, Cass County, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Lawson,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
Richardson,
Aye.
Pryan,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Yes. Motion carries. D, a motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-43.
an ordinance readopting ordinance number 91-2073 as amended, establishing a procedure to disclose potential conflict of interest and substantial interest for certain municipal officials.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
This is the annual readoption that we have of our Missouri Ethics Commission conflict of interest. It is an annual ordinance.
Short and sweet.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
This isn't, I believe this is only required every other year, but we do it every year just
Yes.
to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Move for a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading on Bill 2023-43. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2023-43.
An ordinance readopting ordinance number 91-2073 as amended, establishing a procedure to disclose potential conflict of interest and substantial interest for certain municipal officials.
Present.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
I'd like to ask our council something, which I've been thinking about. It's obvious that you shouldn't vote for something that's going to increase your financial gain. Like right now I'm just talking about us because that's only people I know. But well, maybe I know a few more people. But anyway,
It's making me broke, Rob.
but if your vote is actually against your interest, is that something where you should abstain?
Councilmember Powell, my suggestion is always to avoid both legal and apparent conflicts of interest. And if you ever have a question that you think you might have a conflict and it's something that you want to avoid, you should always abstain whether or not you plan on voting for yourself or against yourself. So again, it's just the simple idea that would the action ever rise to the level of creating an appearance of impropriety to the public? That is the advice of myself and my entire firm when it comes to conflicts of interest.
Okay.
So even if you are voting against yourself, that could becomes something that somebody could, I don't know how, but could determine was an appearance of a conflict.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Basically call you. Okay.
That is sound legal advice, and you should tell it to everybody.
Anybody else? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Richardson?
Aye.
Powell?
Yes.
Bryan?
Aye.
White?
Aye.
Lawson?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Mayor Larky?
Yes. Motion carried. E, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-44.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute the Cooperative Final Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission Cost-Sharing Surface Transportation Block Grant Program Agreement for improvements to North Scott Corridor with the city of Belton, Missouri, in substantially similar form to the draft agreement included in Exhibit A.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. You're up.
So I get to attend a lot of meetings at Mark. A lot of times I feel like I'm not very productive. But at the last Missouri Priorities meeting, there's an opportunity to attain more funds for existing projects that are in the program. The next two resolutions are on this, ordinances are on this list. North Scott, we already got $1.9 million of federal funding to do that project. We were offered an opportunity to gain more money, so I took that opportunity, and we got an additional $1 million added to the project. That's really important because since the time we submitted the project, which was 2 years ago until we actually build it next year, the price has increased significantly. And so this will cover most of the increase in the price, and it actually get us back to an 80-20 match if the bids go the way we think they will. So this is this will authorize us to sign the cooperative agreement to gain an additional $1 million. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
This is just a procedural thing, but in the minutes or in this agenda, they're flipped. In other words, he's talking about the North Scott, but when you go to page whatever it says to go, you're talking about Powell and 58 and vice versa. Maybe it doesn't make a difference, but we just I don't want it to come up and say, oh, our votes were invalid because we voted for the wrong thing.
Do you mean the packets? The pages in
Well,
the packet?
yeah, the agenda.
Okay, well,
Doesn't make, if it doesn't make a difference, I think you discussed both of them. Well, no, you just discussed North Scott, I think. But
if it's out of order in the packet, that's not going to affect the minutes or the procedural.
Okay, great.
So,
What
so we'll
happens.
just change those page numbers on there to whatever they are. And it don't affect the ordinance anyway, so. Anybody else? Thank you for catching that, Rob. Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for a second.
Second.
Motion and a second per second reading. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2023-44.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute the Cooperative Final Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission COT Grant Program Agreement for improvements to North Scott Corridor with the city of Belton, Missouri, in substantially similar form to the draft agreement included as Exhibit A.
Present.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say congratulations.
Thank you.
I kept trying to raise my hand, but
Oh, you gotta get a little higher.
Talking to the
Anybody
mic.
else? What?
And talking to the mic.
And talking to the mic.
I am.
He's got it.
Anybody else? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mayor Larky,
Yes.
Councilmember Bryan,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Powell.
Yes.
Motion carries. F, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-45.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute the Cooperative Final Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission Cost-Sharing Surface Transportation Block Grant Program and Cost-Sharing Supplemental Agreement for 58 and Powell Parkway Multimodal Traffic Relief Project with the city of Belton, Missouri, in substantially similar form to the draft agreement included in Exhibit A.
Present.
Second.
Have a motion and a second.
This is the same situation at that same meeting. I was able to obtain $1.73 million more for this project. The same sort of thing, the costs have escalated. This project was first started, I believe, in like 2018. And we've worked very hard to attain all the properties and do all the work to get this project ready to go. Both these projects are going to be submitted to MoDOT and hopefully be obligated this month, and so that, next month, so that we're able to do the construction next spring.
Go ahead.
Next time, can you tell them we need sidewalks?
Thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2023-45.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute the Cooperative Final Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission Cost-Sharing Surface Transportation Block Grant Program and Cross-Sharing Supplemental Agreement for 58 and Powell Parkway Multimodal Traffic Relief Project with the City of Belton, Missouri, in substantially similar form to the draft agreement included in Exhibit A.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just want to assure people I have no financial interest in Powell Parkway.
That's a good comment.
Anybody else? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Pryan,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Richardson.
Aye.
Motion carries. Consent agenda, one motion non-debatable to approve the recommendations noted. Any member of the council may ask for an item to be taken from the consent agenda for discussion and separate action.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Communications from City Council. Councilman Richardson.
I got nothing.
That's a first.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just some park reminders. There are swim lessons offered monthly, which has been really great value for our family, so just calling that out. Country View Park in West Belton has received some upgrades. They tore out the existing basketball court and goal and the concrete pad leading up to the restroom structure, and they're going to replace that. They also installed 9 disc golf holes. It's like a junior level or beginner course, so it's a great place to start before you head out to Cleveland Lake, which has been a huge draw for disc golfers. There's theater in the park coming up on August 11th with Don't Dress for Dinner, and that one is geared towards adults more. August 12th is The Little Mermaid. That's at Memorial Park. I'll shout out that yoga in the park at High Blue last Saturday was very good, very challenging. As a beginner, I was very sore. And it is still Parks and Rec month, and there is a photo scavenger hunt going on across our 11 parks. So if you haven't got out to do that, you should give it a shot because there are prizes. Thank you.
You're up.
I'm with Chris. I have nothing.
I actually have something.
All right. What do you
I'd
got?
like to wish the mayor and his better half Sheila a happy anniversary.
Really?
Yay. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Councilman Powell?
Yes, last week on July 19th, the Transportation Development District Board met, and the bonds for widening of Mullen and the circle at Mullen and Cambridge have been agreed to $7,647,698 for the project and that's after the existing bonds were paid off. The work should start in the fall. Meanwhile, utilities should be moved completely in August. At that time, we're looking for a temporary street light at Mullen and Sycamore via an agreement with Evergy.
Councilman White?
We will, I'll be hosting a Ward 4 meeting sometime at the end of August, beginning of September.
Okay. I have nothing officially other than try to stay cool and hydrated this week. City Manager?
I have two things this evening. The first is I wanted to remind people or let people know if they didn't that our property tax mill levy hearing is, our public hearing is at the next meeting, which will be August 8th. So just let the public know that. And then the second thing I have is we just today received the draft from the sports tourism market study. And so we'll be picking that apart a little bit, and we'll have some more information for the council and hopefully the public in the near future on that one.
Anybody else? All right. Items for review and discussion. Item A, Public Safety Advisory Committee.
Pass those around.
Police
Thank
Chief
you.
in shadow of his former self.
Thank you.
Oh, you got to put your glasses on?
Scott Lyons, Chief of Police. Two of the cities that I previously worked for had advisory boards to the police department and public service in general, police and fire. And so that's what we're here to talk about tonight, was looking for a little input into whether the mayor and city council would like to see a public safety advisory board or for the city of Belton. I researched some cities in our region and their models for these advisory boards. The duties and responsibilities for each of these boards varied from city to city, and I attached some of the ordinances. I looked at City of Blue Springs, Garden City, Kansas, City of Columbia, Missouri, City of Lee Summit, Missouri, City of Larned, Kansas, City of Lawrence, Kansas, City of Lenexa, Kansas, and the City of Olathe. The main difference that you'll see in public safety advisory boards or police advisory boards, whatever they should call them, is the degree of authority given to the board. And I recommend that the model that we choose as a city would not have any duties or responsibilities related to management oversight, hiring and firing decisions, citizen complaints, employee discipline, labor negotiations, promotions, or fiscal budgets. With the majority of those items that I'm saying to eliminate, we're getting into conflicts of interest, we're getting into confidentiality, and stuff that is handled by other mechanisms that we currently have in the city. In my opinion, an advisory board model operating similar to that of Lee Summit Public Safety Advisory Board would provide the most as far as an advisory support for animal control, emergency management agency, BEMA, the fire department, police department, and traffic management, which is through Public Works. The City of Lee Summit is tasked with the following duties and responsibilities: advise staff on methods and/or procedures to improve public relations and public image. The capability of initiating investigations regarding public complaints. When I was a member of the Lee Summit Police Department, part of my duties included animal control, and we looked at a dangerous dog ordinance. We actually had input from citizens in regards to whether that was they would like to see one based upon species or the type of dog, or just general characteristics of dangerous dogs. And in other cities, Papillion, we did another study related to traffic safety. Review of annual reports and initiatives and programs. That's something that you'll see very common on these boards is that we'll share statistics about crime, traffic accidents. We'll share about initiatives, programs like the license plate reader system, or we may talk about initiatives that we're doing in regards to like hashtag 9 p.m. routine, where we're asking citizens to lock their doors and check their cars around 9 p.m. And so it's a nice way of getting citizen input into those kinds of things. Consider citizen complaints related to traffic regulations. A good example was the research behind primary seatbelt ordinance and others. In the city pavilion, we looked at a couple of areas where we had substantial transition in speed in one corridor that had a lot of pedestrian walks. And so we talked to the Public Safety Advisory Board, or the board, about maybe bringing down the speed limit so there wasn't such a drastic increase in speed as you move through that corridor, to make it a little bit more passable at one constant speed, like 30 miles an hour, as opposed to 25, and then it jumps to 45. Receive reports on traffic crash data, review and recommend traffic ordinances to the city manager and city council, review reports and studies related to animal control, emergency management, fire prevention, fire safety, law enforcement, and traffic ordinances as recommended. And so the City of Lee Summit, I included their ordinance, and it's very simple. The board consists of nine citizens appointed by the mayor with advice and consent of the majority of council. One member of the council shall serve as a liaison with voting rights, appointed by the mayor pro tem with the advice and consent of the majority of council. Number 3, the citizen members serve 3-year terms, which are staggered. We'd have to probably work on maybe appoint somebody for a year, 2 years, and then 3 years, just so we could stagger people out. Just a thought. The board will elect its own chair and vice chair annually after the annual appointments. The board's meetings would be open to the public and shall be conducted pursuant to Missouri Sunshine Law. In Lee Summit, the board, they publish them. They have a monthly. There's a secretary that takes notes and records, and those minutes are published just like we do for city council meetings. The board shall perform, and then B, it talks about the duties and responsibilities. I just wanted to point out just 2 things. Advise the city manager and chief of police and chief of fire on methods and procedures to improve public relations and public image. I think that's a key role of these advisory boards, because they do have they reflect this community, but also to get their input in regards to things. And so, in conclusion, I'm just looking for a little bit of input into what you may like to see, what kind of things you might like in one as opposed to another.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, Chief Lyons, I like the outline you proposed here. I would maybe say add a council member liaison to it so they can report back from the committee, but also, dog bites or things like that all of us hear about individually. We could relay that to the council liaison, and they could take it to the board to discuss and just have some continuity with that. But I like what you've put together.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Yeah, just one thought. Oh, yes.
Oh, Brett for the win. Brett for the win.
Good one. What's the difference between you say you suggested they not talk about citizen complaints on the first page, but on page 2 you say they could talk about citizen complaints on traffic regulations. Is that the only one, or is there something I'm missing that's...
I think that's just a very broad term, and what it really means is like an issue with a traffic area. It's not necessarily a complaint. It's a look at a traffic problem or a traffic issue is what they're trying to get to.
But I would think that maybe you wouldn't want people to come in and complain about specific officers, but if in general they thought that dispatch wasn't handling things appropriately, that would be something that they could bring up to this board, right?
Yes, that would be appropriate for the board.
Okay.
If it entailed identifying a specific employee, there's another mechanism for that
Sure.
that we have.
Thank you.
Anybody else? If you have any thoughts, questions, get them to me or get them to the city manager next week or two. Item B. And hold on, before I do that, I want to back up. We forgot to do something, so do you want to introduce him now or do you want to wait till the end? We should have done it at the beginning, but
Yeah, we should, I mean, absolutely, for the
Sorry.
council and for anybody who might be watching, I do want to introduce Mike Eakey. He is our interim economic development director. Mike brings a wealth of local government experience, and has worked on many economic development projects in the past. Those who follow the local government scene here in Cass County might recognize him because he worked with the city of Raymore for quite a while. In a couple of capacities at one point he was the assistant city manager there, and so we welcome you to the right side of the county.
all right. Item B, police M30 drone purchase.
The police department is putting forward a purchase of a M30 drone. We originally purchased drones for the city of Belton back in 2021. We use these drones not only for the police department, but also for BEMA, Belton Emergency Management Agency, and also for the fire department, public works, and other city functions. And the current drones cannot be upgraded anymore. They're also at the end of their support life as far as maintenance and battery components, that kind of thing, where we have to go out and look for parts. These new drones have greater integrated cameras, thermal capabilities, which we use on occasion when we have suspects that have made it into the woods or high weeds. We can actually use those devices to try to locate them. We can also use those cameras when we're surveilling locations prior to search team operations. These drones also conduct longer flight times, which is very important because we've had several different operations where we've had to bring down drones and put up another agency's drones and swap them out. And sometimes it's not as seamless and we lose contact with what's going on around an operation. The purchase of these drones, although we did get 3 bids and the cheapest was still the vendor that was under the cooperative bid. It still comes under budget, $35,082.98. And that is about it, if you have any questions.
Go ahead.
So in the capital, you had asked for a couple, and that got taken out. Those were for new ones above the current, correct?
Mm-hmm.
This is Lieutenant John Baker.
Yes.
Hi again. Your question again, please?
So in the proposed budget, you had several drones that were proposed and they were taken out of the capital. And so those were, I guess, were new and additional ones to the ones you had. This one is the one you're asking for now is a replacement. Is that the difference between what was taken out and this one?
So we're actually looking to request 2 M30 drones. Each parcel kit runs about $16,000 per unit. What we're wanting to do is we have the 2 drones that the chief talked about that have reached their end of support life with the manufacturer. We want to pull those out into a training capacity and then replace those with the 2 new M30s, which have greater capabilities both in sensor capabilities, flight times, and endurance.
Yeah, I know. My question is, though, they were in the proposed budget, they were taken out. Now you're coming back with new ones, and so are they, if I remember right, in the proposed budget, you were adding some more ones to the stock, and now you're replacing. Is that the difference between?
Yeah, with these 2 drones, we're not going to be growing our fleet. We're taking 2 out. Yes.
That's what I was double checking.
Okay.
Anybody else? Will these new ones have better than a 2-year life?
Yes, they should. When we purchased the ones in 2021, we didn't know at the time, but they had already started working on a new model that they were going to put out but these are going to be on, we know that they're going to be good for 5 years at least, if not greater than that, because they are the newest on the market.
Anybody else? All right. Item C, meter reading equipment.
This evening, I want to talk about the meter reading system that we have and how it currently works and the problems we're having. If you remember back in January, we brought an ordinance to you to buy antennas to place on the water towers and the police tower to be able to read the meters directly and read them basically about every 15 minutes. Since we passed that ordinance, we went to the company, we had a contract for them to sign, and we were very excited to get it installed. The company delayed and delayed and delayed and eventually did not sign the contract with us. And they announced that they have discontinued that product line and no longer will service those readers that we have. Because of that, we have written them, and Patrick is beginning to communicate them about their lack of service and likability. What they wanted us to do was switch from a system that we paid 15 cents per house or per meter to a cellular system that costs $1 per meter per month, which is $108,000 a year, just to get reads and transmit that data to City Hall. Because of the problems we have with the company, they're not wanting to respond to us, work with us on a program. We're basically left in a place where we can either continue to do the reads on the ones we have, and that system will end at a certain point, or make a switch. So it is time for us to look at making a switch. So to understand how meter reading is, I want to take you back to the beginning, understand how we got here. In 2003, before 2003, all meter reading was done by a person who'd walk around and actually look at meters. It was not an exciting job, but it had to be done, and people went out and physically read meters. In 2003, we upgraded the system to a transmitter on it, where a person can either carry a transmitter receiver on them, or they could drive a truck and receive the signals. They last about 15 years. So in about 2016, 2017, the finance director at that point struck an agreement with this company to go ahead and replace them all and actually move to a system that we could use the antennas. So this agreement was made and signed in 2018. We started placing the transmitters in all the meters, in the meter pits. COVID hit, and so in 2020 and 2021, we actually stopped installing them because people didn't feel comfortable with us walking up to their front yards and installing them. So we delayed and went back, and we're finishing it off. We're going to do the last piece, which is to install the antennas so we could do the reads. Since 2017, when they decided to move to that system, that's called an automatic meter reading system, where it's a one-way. The meter transmits a signal to us. The idea is to transmit to an antenna. That antenna would then send the data to a cellular system that would send it to the company, and then they send it to us for processing. Since then, everybody's moved to what they call an advanced meter infrastructure, an AMI system. In an AMI system, it's a two-way communication system where we can actually communicate with the meter. And so in that sort of system, a person can sit there and actually call up and actually read the meter directly. We can also turn the meter on, we can turn the meter off, and it provides a lot more information than we currently have. In order to change that sort of system, either way, we're going to end up having to replace part of the system that's on every meter. So on every meter currently, there's a piece of equipment that sits on the meter itself that makes the reads, and then on the lid there's a transmitter. You see the little eye that looks like on top of it. We are going to have to change all our meters lids from being metal to going to plastic so they can actually read properly, and we're going to have to look at changing our transmitters. We received an unsolicited proposal from a company that we currently use who does our tanks, who also does this work, who gave us an idea of costing and how this would work. With this program, we're also looking at the possibility of having them install it all, because we're going to want to quickly change over from one system to another, not take another 3 years to switch systems. And switch systems, and that way they would provide 7 antennas. They have to secure a frequency that the antennas can communicate. They would also have to write the software, which they already have, that communicates to Central Square, so to our finance department. And that way we can then take that information from Central Square, hire a third person who would send out the bills. So we can basically automate the water system, and we don't have to have people out driving trucks around trying to get meter reads, read meters all the time. When people call in for reads, it wouldn't work. There's a lot of other features to it, such as if we know where elderly people live, if we don't get any movement on a meter in a day, we can send the police over to do a wellness check to make sure they're okay. If there's somebody whose meter is just spinning at full throttle for a few hours, we can send warnings to us. It'll send warnings to your phone, so you'll know something's wrong at your house and you can see it. You can also check things at your house by turning certain things on and off, and you can see how much water you're actually using. It's a very good system for monitoring. But we have one proposal. We think it's best for us to go out and issue an RFP and get more proposals to see who else could do it at different costs and different levels of service to do this. So I wanted to advise you that we are going to be doing this, that we need to replace all these. Meanwhile, we're going to be going back to the old company, try to recover money that we've spent on it and return parts back to them and try to get our system built and back up to speed. I'd be happy. I know it's a lot of information about how meters work. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
What we have right now with the new transmitters, the only thing that the company balked on was, or they stopped supplying us, was when it got to the antennas, right?
Correct. So if we want to continue with a system that is a manual read, where we actually have to go out and get the reads with either a hand reader or a pickup truck, we could do that. But there is no way you could actually see what your reads are on an hourly basis. There's no way to do any, it would just, it's just an older system.
No, but I thought we'd gone along with this company that screwed us long enough to get new equipment, their equipment into everybody's front yard, but they just balked on the antennas, isn't that?
So it's a proprietary system that they own,
Oh, okay.
and it's a signal that only they can read.
Okay, so we can't go to another vendor and get just the antennas?
No, so part of
Okay.
what we're going to switch to, and it's a great point that you bring up, is that we want to hire a company that is not meter dependent. So that way we can use meters from different companies. We're not just stuck to one meter company. If they raise their prices, we can just switch to another meter company, and we have multiple users.
I see. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I guess I have two questions. You mentioned how the first proposal we got included the kind of automation where a third party would handle the billing. Would that affect our utility clerk staffing?
Potentially.
Okay. And then do you anticipate asking for any of these costs to pass through to residents, or do we have it in the budget to make the switch over?
So what we propose doing is actually stopping a couple projects we had planned this year and using the dollars that we have in the water and sewer side to pay for this to make it happen.
Gotcha. Okay. I know it's early. Thank you.
Yeah, just to answer your question more completely, we do not anticipate going back to the users and increasing fees for this. We're just going to try to make it work with what we've already got budgeted. It would just put a pause on a couple of projects.
Do you want to say what those projects are?
It's basically some I&I work that we have.
Okay.
Some water line work that we had. Some the diesel backup system for power generation at the treatment plant. We would just have to hold off on doing that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I heard you say we had one bid from one company, but we can go out and get more bids. I guess my question to you, is that bid competitive? Is it in our budget, and how are we paying for it?
That's kind of what we're just talking about, is that we're trying to figure out how we would pay for it, and we are going to go out for bid to see how competitive it is.
I didn't know if we're going to use it from the
old company is
ARPA
out.
funds still, or we have impact fees and can't use that kind of stuff?
Probably no, not necessarily. No, those are the ARPA funds we've already essentially
got rid of,
used at this point. They've already been allocated and used. So, and as far as the impact fees, do have some restrictions with them, and so
I think, if I remember right, don't we have some unallocated money in the water fund?
well, this.
I can't call it
in this-
cash carryover,
in
but
this budget
it's-
season, we've kind of done some of that allocating to try and that's one reason we were able to keep rates from
Okay.
going up again. And I'm not saying we don't have any, but I'm just saying we don't have a bunch of pots of money sitting there that we can draw this from, unfortunately.
how much are we actually talking? I missed that then.
Well, the one proposal we have right now is $3.6 million.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't mention it right off.
Plus, if I heard correctly, Patrick promised us a refund on our old system, right?
I made no such promises, as those promises would be a little early in the process.
You promised you'd try.
I will try.
And coming.
Yes, I will zealously advocate for the city.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Item D, Unified Development Code text amendments relating to Old Town Belton and fees.
Yep, we will have a set of text amendments that will be brought to City Council at the next meeting related to allowing drive-through restaurants in the Old Town Belton Overlay District, but they would be specifically limited to just properties with frontage on East North Avenue, since that is the only arterial street in the Old Town Belton Overlay District. We also have amendments to the schedule of fees and charges, which would include adjustments to sign permit fees. We would also be adding the preliminary and final development plan fees that we have been assessing since at least 2016. They're just not in that table. And then updating the vacation fee to match similar types of application fees to help us recuperate costs that we are losing on public noticing and staff review time on those. Included in that, what we presented to the Planning Commission last week was adding a rental registration fee. However, we will probably strike that from this amendment and bring that forward once there's more direction on the rental after the council meeting where we discuss more about the rental inspection program.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Entertain a motion to enter an executive discussion, discuss matters pertaining to the leasing, purchase, sale of real estate according to Missouri State Statute 610.021.2 and to individual identifiable personal records, performance ratings, or records pertaining to employees or applicants for employment according to Missouri State Statute 610.021.13 and the record be closed and the meeting adjourned from there.
Present.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Lawson?
Aye.
Powell?
Yes.
Richardson?
Aye.
Bryant?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
White?
Aye.
Mayor Larkey?
Yes. Motion passes.